Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans, taking you through Tuesday's top stories with the help of my comedian panel. I'm joined tonight by Tower of Toxic Masculinity, Leo Kearse, and mansplainer extraordinaire, Nick Dixon. So not much to choose between you there by the sound of it.
We're going to need some toxic masculinity soon, though, because Putin's looking like he's going to invade more places in Europe.
And you put that down to the lack of toxic masculinity.
Well, look, some would argue the opposite. That's what's caused it.
It's got to be met by equal and opposite toxic masculinity.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're suggesting?
I think the most toxic masculine country will win.
Yeah, well, this is the old way it was fought out, wasn't it? I do think it's about time we return to champions, basically, doing battle one-on-one with spears.
I nominate you.
I'm saying that for some time. Anyway, let's have a look at those front pages. I don't think Putin has made it onto the front pages for a while, actually, thinking about it. Daily Mail has certainly gone with the toxic line, now ban trans women from female sports. Financial Times, US and Europe in frantic diplomacy to deter Israel from striking back at Iran. The Telegraph, Wallace, no mention from Gromit. Wallace, West must stand up to Iranian bullies. iNews, Britain and US tell Netanyahu, don't start a world war with Iran revenge. Metro, this is an outrage. That's Donald Trump's criminal case. And finally, the Daily Star, TV Vicky, the dog ate my passport. Those were your front pages. So let's start with Tuesday's Metro, Leo, and recidivist jailbird Donald Trump.
Yeah, so this is Donald Trump's trial. Well, one of his trials has started today with jury selection, and he was in court. Trump was in court. He spoke to journalists. He said this is political persecution like never before, and he's got a point. He's being, this has been trumped up, no pun intended, into, it should be a misdemeanor. It's over him paying off Stormy Daniels, who's a porn star that he, had sex with and then paid money to go away, as politicians in America tend to do.
Well, that is what they say you pay a prostitute for. It's not the sex; it's to go away afterwards.
And it didn't work in this case. It rarely does if you're famous. But Bill Clinton obviously did it with Paula. Yes. Paula Jones got a much worse deal. She wasn't even a porn star, and he paid much more money. But in Trump's case, they're trying to peg it as campaign finance. They're saying he breached campaign finance rules,
slush funds to hush money.
Yeah, which makes it a felony because he was doing it while he was campaigning. But he could argue, well, he will argue in court that he's just protecting his personal reputation and protecting embarrassment to his wife. And John Edwards, who's a Democratic presidential candidate, did the exact same thing, and wasn't charged with any felony. So it does seem that Trump's been singled out and persecuted, based on who he is rather than what he's done.
It has been relentless, hasn't it, Nick?
Total outrage. Yeah, it's outrageous. And the judge actually threatened Trump with arrest if he doesn't show up every day for court. So he's calling this election interference because you're in peak election season. You're tying him up, physically as well as, financially. And also, apparently, there was a juror questionnaire from the judge that only asked people if they would follow or have an association with Donald Trump, but didn't ask about Biden. So, there's some scepticism on X today about whether there'll be a fair jury. And, he can appeal it later, but by the time he does, the election will be over. So it's all about tying him up for the election. A few little extra things. Trump was, I think, rightfully complaining he won't be able to go to his son's graduation, which seems quite mean. And he's calling it a scam and a political witch hunt, which I have to say I agree with.
And, I mean, it's tying him up, as you say, physically, which may or may not have been a service that Stormy herself provided at one point. We don't know. But it's sort of tying him up mentally as well, isn't it? Even not just that he's not able to attend the election rallies or so on. I don't know how much effort and time he puts into them, whether he has other people doing his speechwriting or running his campaign. Obviously, it doesn't demonstrate a huge amount of intellectual input, but still, this sort of thing preys on your mind.
Yeah, but it's quite a lot of energy to go and do those big rallies. He's 77, going to be in court all day. Yeah, it's just a way of taking him out because they know their guy can't win legitimately, which is Sleepy Joe, who 38% of voters think is going to be dead by the end of his second term. And
they're trying to winnow him down with attrition, financial attrition, because all these lawyers, it costs money, even the ones that Trump uses.
Well, they call it lawfare now. That's a word that's got to be Chambers' word of the year, I would say, but we'll see whether it comes out. Even Elon does agree with that anyway. Moving on to the Telegraph, Nick, and we've got Ben Wallace.
Yeah, Wallace, West must stand up to Iranian bullies. And this is the Telegraph quoting a different Telegraph piece and calling it a front page. So he did a comment piece in the Telegraph, and they've quoted from it. And it was an interesting piece. You know, he was saying, we need to stand up to bullies. We've taken the wrong tack with Iran. He says we've ignored them like a child misbehaving in a restaurant, throwing a tantrum, thinking, oh, they'll go away.
Yeah.
You get a bit of a mixed metaphor, because he then says they're a bully, which is different from the child metaphor. But he says they're a bully, we have to stand up to them and hit back twice as hard. Interestingly, he also says in the piece that Israel has not stood with Ukraine. So he says it also has to go both ways. He says we have to stand firmly with Israel, but they've got to cough up for Ukraine as well and get involved with that. So it was quite a strong criticism. Quite different from Rishi, who's popped up saying that Netanyahu needs to show restraint.
Yeah.
So Wallace is gone now, he can say what he wants, and he's taken a different angle from Rishi, who's probably just following Cameron in the slightly more, less bullish about Israel realm.
Well, the consensus from most Western leaders does seem to be hang on Israel, because it does seem to me that Iran did as much as they could get away with doing without necessarily... But they basically sent some missiles knowing that they would be intercepted, that they would fall on empty desert, that it was a kind of like, we have to do something. You can't just destroy our consulate and expect us to remain...
And it actually revealed that Iran looks weak. I mean, they sent a lot of drones. I think it was 350 drones and missiles, but they're these Shahed drones that fly really slowly, so they were easy targets.
Right.
And countries around Israel actually helped, that previously would have maybe, helped an invasion of Israel, actually helped shoot down the drones. Jordan shot down these drones when they went over its airspace. So if Israel fights back, sends missiles back, people in Jordan, people in countries around Israel will be worried about these missiles flying over their head.
Yeah.
They'll lose sympathy. They'll put pressure on their own governments to not support Israel. So I think it'd be a bit of a mistake for Israel to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory by hitting back.
And then I saw the other day, I don't know if this is connected, that Saudi Arabia, I think one of the crown princes said out loud, acknowledged that Iran was trying to destabilise the normalisation of Israel, which, of course, Saudi has been involved in. I think that's the first time anyone's actually officially put that on the record. But, that's still what's at stake. And we talked about that a lot in October, that this was presumably what was the intention. That seems to have been forgotten since, because it's just all been about raining hell down on Gaza. Yeah. But now that Iran is kind of expanding the theatre a bit, people are starting to remember what it was, possibly the motivation was in the first place. Yeah. Would you say, Nick? I don't know.
Yeah, I generally agree with what you said.
You
said it very well.
You can just give me an emoji. That would be fine. What are the Daily Mail leading with, Leo?
So the Daily Mail have now banned trans women from female sports. So transgender athletes should be banned from competing against women. The Culture Secretary told the sporting chiefs yesterday. They've got a picture there of a before and after transition. No, that's Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels. I was thinking, these transitions are getting good. We should have more of them.
That's Stormy Daniels.
You would have the best transition anyone's ever heard of, wouldn't you? Many people are saying it's the total transition.
So this is Lucy Fraser said officials had a duty to give female athletes a sporting chance because male-born rivals have an indisputable edge. And if you go through male puberty, you get stronger bones, greater muscle strength. It's easier to parallel park outside the stadium.
Lucy Fraser is cropping up again a bit later about the trans lobby and the nonsense and the ideology that's penetrated the NHS. It does feel like more people are breaking cover now, coming above the parapet. But it's taken them long enough, hasn't it? Exactly. It's been at least a couple of years we've known
It's taken people a long time, and now they're sort of glory hunters now. They're coming through. So we've always supported Man City. They're coming through now.
Riding down to bayonet the wounded.
That's how financial fair play issue. But look, it's better late than never, so welcome aboard, really.
Absolutely. Well, those are the front pages. Join us in a couple of minutes for the second section with Home Office criminals, hatred of the hate crime, and BBC make yet another lame apology over Israel. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Mark White was saying there, Sue, that he thinks it's getting worse, and you were nodding along to that. You've seen this over decades. Situation, it's sprawling along the coast, more people, and the danger is ramping up.
Definitely, because the numbers and the money it's run like a military operation. I mean, I've been told that by the National Crime Agency, and I don't need to be told it by them to know it. It is meticulous because there's so much money involved. So they're marshalling migrants here, the gangs, they're controlling the gangs, and there will be a kingpin. In some city far away in Erbil or even in Paris or in Brussels, who never goes anywhere near the beaches. It's like a Ponzi scheme, really.
Yeah. With that in mind, there's such vested interest, such money, such demand, a never-ending string of demand of people who want to come here.
People
How on
are
earth?
already on their way, remember?
Yeah.
If we stop them now, they're already leaving. There's people leaving the Sudan now are going to reach the only place they want to get to, the French beaches, to get to the UK. They'll arrive in 2.5 years' time.
And so,
You see, they're on their way.
if it's that organised, that lucrative, that desirable, how on earth do we ever break that chain?
It sounds incredibly harsh, but I think if the EU change politically in the June elections, which I think it probably will,
Yes.
I think they will put up, as the Greeks have done, holding camps all over Europe, the coasts of Europe, where people are assessed, just to see who is coming in, which would be a plus, as the Greeks have done, because we have no idea who is coming in.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Tuesday's newspapers with me, Simon Evans, and comedians Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. So, Leo, the world's least popular travel agency has added 4 new destinations to its roster. This is in the Times.
So the UK targets 4 countries for a Rwanda deal. So this is, I mean, they're going to use these countries like they're trying to use Rwanda.
Rwanda is now a sort of generic term.
Yeah, so they're going to replicate the Rwanda migrant deportation scheme, by which I'm guessing they mean it's never going to actually happen.
Nothing's going to happen, yeah.
So, and the countries they're looking at are Armenia, the Ivory Coast, Costa Rica and Botswana. So quite a mixed bag there. This is according to leaked documents. And a list of African countries, including Cape Verde, Senegal, Tanzania, Togo, Angola and Sierra Leone were also put on a reserve list that could be approached if other targets failed. But some countries in Africa just explicitly declined. They didn't want it at all. They're Morocco, Tunisia, Namibia and the Gambia. This comes as the Rwanda bill is, I think it's about to receive royal assent.
I mean, I don't know too much about each of these individual countries. I think Botswana is often held up as the greatest post-colonial success. I think its economy and its political stability and so on have been...
They've struggled, apparently, with providing sufficient accommodation, whereas Costa Rica is considered a good candidate due to its positive relationship with the UNCHR. So you can list here, they've sort of listed them all like a choose-your-fighter. Like country. Ivory Coast would lead to problems with
France. Côte d'Ivoire would lead to problems with Chelsea.
Really?
Yeah, that's where they get half their players from.
OK,
Didier Drogba from there.
Good point. Another football reference. I should have got it. And apparently it would cause problems with Anglo-French relations. One line I found mildly amusing was it said they're looking at things like, you know, they have to be signatories to the Refugee Convention, and they have to have good treatment of refugees, but it says they have to have a good track record on asylum decision-making. I was thinking, we don't have that. No. You just show up, say you're Christian, and you can do what you want.
I mean, I quite like the idea of the South American countries for a couple of reasons. First of all, they're definitely not going to paddle back from there, are they? They're there. And also, there is a long history of people seeking amnesty in South America, from problematic regimes.
Well, funnily enough, even now, Germans are moving to Paraguay because they can see what's happening in Germany with the massive insane levels of migration they've had there. So they've
done that in the past. Nietzsche's sister set up a specifically, explicitly anti-Semitic commune there, and they all died of malaria and stuff.
They might steer clear of Argentina. It didn't always go well for everyone, did it?
No, absolutely. Still, also, I like the way it's opening up, because Rwanda has proved to be a bit disappointing, but they've gone, do you know what, let's really double down on this and see if this can't be... I'm sure they'll find one in due course. Guardian now, Nick, and my main concern with this story is the meaning of the word dozens.
Interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
But it's dozens of Home Office staff under criminal investigation, FOI data shows, and you're saying that it's far more than dozens.
No, I'm saying it's 2.5 dozen, and that, to me, is not quite dozens. I don't know why, but I feel you need to have three.
Yeah, you want three. Yeah. Yes, you're right. Good point. So it's the ACCIU, who are the Anti-Corruption Criminal Investigation Unit, and it turns out there were 16 allegations, and there was a further 18 under investigation. There's already been 2 criminal convictions. And these are for things like immigration crime, which is quite bad if you're in the Home Office, I imagine, fraud and drug offences. And so I'm not quite sure why the Guardian's going with it. I think it's because they think it's an attack on the government. But I see the Home Office as kind of the woke people that scuppered Ursula Braverman's plans. So, of course, they were off drugging themselves up.
That's exactly how I read it. I was shocked it was in the Guardian. I wondered whether it was whether they shot their own feet. And that is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
The Home Office as a department is not...
I love this echo chamber.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest corruption in the civil service is the fact that they defy elected representatives. Like, we don't vote for the civil service. We don't vote for those mandarins in Whitehall, but we do vote for the MPs who make rules, like the Rwanda scheme, and then the civil service turn around and say, they openly say, we're not going to, even if it gets passed, we're going to do everything we can to stymie it.
And, obviously this was the theme of Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister, so it's been going on for a long time. But it was interesting, I think, that a lot of people thought when it came out Yes Minister was a satire on the new Tory administration, which had come in a couple of years earlier, Margaret Thatcher. But apparently, according to the writers, I read a book about it, it was all written under Harold Wilson. So it was a kind of satire. So what I'm saying is it's not always the left-wing civil service that muffles the agenda of a government, a right-wing government. It's actually... they just muffle them, whatever. Right. I mean, I don't know if it's...
What are they going to do to muffle Labour?
Yeah.
I mean, they're both completely ideologically aligned.
Yeah, terrifying. We need checks and balances urgently.
Will they put through Starmer's agenda or just also defy Starmer? Quite interesting.
Yeah, we are going to find out. Leo, it looks like the Scottish hate crime bill could be the Liz Truss of legislation.
Possibly. So Humza Yousaf, the SNP leader and the First Minister of Scotland, faces a Tory vote to repeal hate crime law. He's facing a vote at Holyrood to repeal his disastrous hate crime laws amid warnings that a deluge of complaints is placing an intolerable strain on Police Scotland. So there have been over 7,000 complaints so far, and some of them, only around 4% have been taken up as serious and investigated by the police. But that's still a lot. There's still 240, and they've included... There was a 74-year-old woman who posted on Facebook that basically her neighbour had sort of maliciously, vexatiously complained, and she's had issues with her neighbour before. All the neighbours have, apparently. And the police came along and arrested her, took her phone and all the rest of it. So it's an incredibly traumatic process for her. Unfortunately, this motion to repeal the hate crime bill is unlikely to pass because the Tories were the only party to oppose the legislation during its passage before. And, unfortunately, I hate to shock you, but there aren't that many Tories in Scotland.
There's about 5 of them, aren't there? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to the SNP at the next election, but the Labour SNPs, they're called SNPs as against SNPs, right? The Scottish...
MSPs.
Yeah, MSPs,
SNP, that would be easy.
They were keen on this bill as well. This was not an SNP creation again.
Well, that guy, Anas Sawa, the Labour leader, he's also done his own anti-white speech. He's basically a copy of Humza Yousaf. But the problem with it, what I thought when I read this is the problem with anarcho-tyranny is that you have to have the resources, don't you? They're trying to do anarcho-tyranny, but they haven't got enough resources to tyrannise the population. And that's probably why things like the Soviet Union collapsed. At some point, these things become so absurd, they just fall apart. The only thing I was thinking as well is it's terrible for them because it's a high-profile case and they've never done anything good to counter it. But also, the amount of people reporting these things, who's reporting these pointless hate crimes? Like, can you imagine ever doing that except as a joke? And I was thinking, we have to start doing it because otherwise they'll just say, there are no crimes against straight white men or something. You know what I mean? And no one's reporting them. So people in Scotland have to do it.
It's true. You've got to build up the stats. You've got to keep... it is a good question whether most of these cases are just the initial surge of enthusiasm or indeed the initial surge of satire. People cynically trying to demonstrate that it's unworkable. Need to see it calm down in a couple of weeks' time. But That is not the principle on which I wish it to be opposed. It's morally abhorrent. It's not that it's not workable. Staying with the Telegraph, and the BBC are in lukewarm water over a clumsy Nick Robinson subjunctive.
Yes, BBC's Nick Robinson, I should have been clearer, over Israel has murdered Palestinian claims. So he was interviewing David Cameron. I still can't call him Lord. He's not my Lord. And he was saying that he used the phrase, Israel has murdered tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians. And obviously that is strange immediately, because it's not really a war word, is it, murder?
No.
You say kill. In war, you don't really say murdered. So it sounds already a bit biased. And he's sort of apologised on X and said, I should have been clear that I was not expressing my own view, let alone that of the BBC. So you wonder whose it was then. I mean, it wasn't anyone's. Now, I suppose some people on the pro-Palestine side would use a phrase like that. So you could argue, is it sort of the adversarial style the BBC's known for? But, of course, the problem is when you've already been known to be suspected of bias, refusing to call Hamas terrorists and so on, everyone is now looking for the BBC to behave like this, and so they've walked right into that again. Although a BBC spokesman says that the BBC holds itself to high standards of impartial reporting and rejects the suggestion that we are biased against Israel, but everyone thinks they are somehow.
Yeah. I think, having looked at the question, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that he intended to make it a sort of a hypothetical question. Exactly. But the way he said it didn't come across that way. If I was partial to the Israeli cause, I would have found that unacceptable.
And it echoes comments that have been made by other BBC journalists. One of them referred to, in an interview said, so the Israeli army are happy to kill children, which is a very loaded way to phrase that. And also, this is repeated, time and time again, that Israel has killed tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians. Yeah. And in reality, a huge swathe of those are Hamas militants. Yeah. And Hamas use civilians as human shields. So it's difficult to kill them. Really, the blood is on Hamas's hands as much as Israel's. It's
extraordinarily difficult. I mean, you could talk for an hour about whether or not the word murder is appropriate in war. A lot of people say, well, philosophers have dedicated their lives to trying to understand the legitimacy of taking another life under certain conditions. And I am not 100% clear, maybe I should find out, whether they are technically at war, because it's not technically quite the same as two sovereign nations, is it? In that regard. So it's quite difficult to say, well, is this war? Do you know what I mean?
It's an asymmetric war, but, if Israel doesn't wage war on Hamas, then basically we've set the precedent where Hamas can just go into Israel, kill whoever it wants, go back, and then Israel can't attack them because some civilians might die.
I'm not denying the legitimacy, just what category... Because in the same way that the BBC got into trouble for refusing to say that Hamas are a terrorist organisation. Well, if you say they're a terrorist organisation, then you can't be at war with them, because you can only be at war with another sovereign state. Right. And Hamas, you've essentially said they're illegitimate because they're a terrorist organisation. You see what I mean? It's very difficult. But still, Robinson needs to be careful. In your wheelhouse here, Leo, and Workshire Scroungers are in the mail.
I know a lot of them. You might be able to tell from the accent. But calls for universal credit there are calls for universal credit to be reformed as the number of those on long-term sick leave doubles in a decade. So this is the Resolution Foundation think tank has revealed that while unemployment has fallen sharply, the number of benefit claimants out of work due to ill health has surged from 1.2 million in 2013 to 2.3 million last year. So basically people have moved from being unemployed into being on long-term sick pay. And this is going to cost 86 billion a year by 2028, which is a huge amount of money, although funnily enough less than if they hadn't moved to a universal credit system. But this system incentivises people to be sick. You get up to an extra $5,000 if you're on long-term sick as opposed to just unemployed. So there's an incentive. I know people I went to school with see the benefit system as almost as a career to be gamed to work out how you get the most out of it.
That is tragic. That anyone of your age, or even maybe I'm 58.
I'm 24.
It is horrible when people start to see. Terrible incentives like that, distorted incentives that reduce them from working. But I'm also very concerned that there'll be people in their mid to late 50s who will just see an off-ramp at this point and just think, having been off work for a couple of years under COVID, probably got a bit of the old long COVID, you know, not feeling 100%. Just want to sort of, you know, see out their shift now, really, on the sofa. And this is a significant part of the workforce. I mean, we're talking about a country that's probably going to have to push the retirement age back at some point, and yet the de facto age is maybe mid-50s now.
One thing that's grimly amusing is that universal credit is in the final stages of being phased in, but now it has to be phased out. They've been phasing it into 2013, but now it's got to go because it doesn't work anymore.
Maybe we could phase in Javier Milei.
I would vote for that. We're halfway through. After the break, we have Salman wants to return to his spawning ground, the race card, and how to play it, and the drug law lottery. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Hello again, welcome to the latest weather forecast from the Met Office. It's going to stay blustery over the next 24 hours, but less windy than it has been, and the showers will slowly ease as well. Low pressure is pulling away, it's moving east. We've got high pressure arriving later in the week, but for the time being, the weather stays very changeable with showers or longer spells of rain moving through during the evening. Many of these showers will actually fade away after midnight, although some will continue down the North Sea coast there. 1 or 2 for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and central England, but otherwise plenty of drier and clearer weather emerging later in the night. A chill in the air first thing Tuesday, but too breezy for most for a frost. And there'll be plenty of bright weather first thing, especially for Scotland, Northern England, parts of Western UK. But further cloud and showers will affect the North Sea coast, and showers will tend to bubble up elsewhere, particularly for Northern Ireland, parts of central and southern England, Wales and northwest Scotland. It's going to stay on the cold side, but temperatures a degree or so higher compared with Monday's, and less windy, so a bit more pleasant out there. Another chilly start on Wednesday, but again, plenty of sunshine first thing, turning cloudy and damp for Northern Ireland, showers emerging elsewhere, but plenty of bright or at least drier weather in between the showers. And then as we go through the latter half of the week, things do slowly turn drier, more settled and warmer.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So, arts news now, Nick, and this will be devastating to Donald Trump. He has lost Salman Rushdie.
Yes, his biggest fan says, Salman Rushdie, unleash Donald Trump, will drive me back to Britain. This is quite shocking. In his memoir, Knife, Meditations After an Attempted Murder, he says that a return for the former US president scares him more than the attack that almost killed him. At least that's the way the Times are phrasing him. That's not a direct quote, it seems, but there are direct quotes where he talks about choosing between a post-Brexit Britain and a second Trump presidency. He calls it choosing the lesser of two evils, but one evil, meaning Britain, has my family in it. So it's kind of the liberal mindset that's so extreme that, you know, it doesn't matter what happens to you, you still sort of side with liberal, because you could argue, of course, that liberalism allows things like the attacks that happen on. Now, you could argue, of course, the British government protected him for 10 years. Maybe he has kind of ties in the sort of neoliberal world. He maybe in the Bush world and Clinton, maybe sort of anti-Trump for those reasons. But it did seem incredibly strange.
Especially considering, I mean, his glory years when he was in the same set as Martin Amis and Christopher Hitchens and Ian McEwan, they were all the bright young things of the London literary scene. That was under Thatcher's Britain. I mean, maybe we were still in the EU or whatever it was called at that point, but it was definitely harder right, more divisive, more brutal to community and so on. It was undergoing a more vicious neoliberal revolution than anything that's happened under Rishi Sunak, or is certainly going to happen under Keir Starmer.
Or any of the communists that we've had.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It shows like Nick was saying, it shows the sort of insane ideology of the left. That, this guy's been hunted by Islamists, since the fatwa was imposed on him. And
which,
now,
if anything, is one thing that Britain does have a lot more of now, of course. Maybe he doesn't want to say that, but he's saying it's post-Brexit.
Yeah, I don't know if he's trying to, cozy up to his attackers to try and stop another attack.
It's tricky, because you could argue as well that Trump's sort of isolationist policies are less likely to lead to retribution, than many others. So there's different ways you could argue it. Which I'm saying that makes the same point again. But there's this strange idea that Trump's going to be much worse when he's unleashed. I don't believe this idea that Trump... I'd love it, but I don't believe this idea that Trump's going to be unleashed in his second term, just be able to do what he wants. So I think people like Rushdie he's got reason to be paranoid about some things, not so much about Trump.
Do you know what, though? Trump, I mean, he is absolutely the demographic that found Trump a real shock, like a personal outrage and affront, like De Niro clearly did, you know, because they regarded themselves as being... part of the liberal elite is one way of talking about it, but actually they really thought they were like the figureheads of America. Everyone loved them. They were what Americans were proud of. And suddenly Americans went, no, we find you a bit annoying. we want this guy. Anyway, Daily Mail now, Leo, one of the least fruity scandals to engulf the Grenadier Guards.
So suggesting someone is playing the race card if they complain about how they've been treated at work is racist, an employment tribunal has ruled. So this ruling came in the case of British Army musician Dwight Pyle Gray, which it's quite a white-sounding name. It sounds like a actual colour you get in Dulux for a very just off-white.
Or a carpet.
Who successfully sued the Ministry of Defence for racial discrimination, harassment and victimisation. So he's a black Rastafarian French horn player and lance sergeant in the Grenadier Guards. He took legal action after he was denied entry to his barracks while wearing civilian clothes by a guard who did not believe at first he was a soldier. I mean, isn't that what a guard is supposed to do? You don't just
you look like a soldier. Go on, in you go.
This is just going to result in people waving through people into areas that they shouldn't be in. As happened in the Manchester Arena. Sadly, the security guard was afraid of looking racist if he stopped the.
That's true. I mean, the Grenadier Guards must be a target to some point. It sounds like there was slightly snippy language was traded. But
yeah, but imagine the abuses this will lead to, not just in the way Leo says, but in terms of he was playing the race card basically, so you're perfectly entitled to say that. It's like the Me Too movement, believe all women. Obviously, absurd idea. If no one's allowed to say the phrase "you're playing the race card," then you can just. You can just use that and abuse it even more, right? And of course, white people aren't going to do that. I mean, if white people did play the race card, no one cares anyway. People just say, "Yeah, we hate you." So what are we going to? So it doesn't seem very fair.
I'm going to say something that this might get me into trouble, but what I find surprising subtextually here is that a black Rastafarian French horn player in the Grenadier Guards was not memorable enough that the guards did. I mean, you would think he would be the one guy you would remember, right? There is another picture of them all marching with the bearskins, except one who's a Sikh and has a turban on. And I personally don't have a problem with that at all, but I would imagine that he would be one of the more memorable again if you. But anyway, maybe there is some
amongst
reason.
all the Pyle Gray people.
Young people face restrictions on their driving, Nick, with graduated licences to prevent designated drivers.
Yes, it's banned new drivers from having passengers their age to cut deaths, says AA. And the idea is they shouldn't be able to have a passenger their age for up to 6 months after passing to cut down all these needless deaths. Apparently, nearly 5,000 people are killed or seriously injured in crashes involving at least one young driver every year. So I do sympathise. I mean, I'm torn. The whole point of driving when you're young is to give your friends a lift and take them back from school and mess about and stuff. And it's fun. And it's some of the most fun times you'll have. At the same time, people also did get in crashes at my school and got permanently injured and quite nasty stuff. Because obviously they're young people, they're idiots, no prefrontal cortex. and they shouldn't be driving in another way. So I'm kind of torn. Is it safetyism and ruining the fun of life?
Testosterone blockers, maybe, before you can drive?
Yeah.
Well, they've all got those now anyway, so...
As long as you've got your puberty blockers, you're all right. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. It is harsh to deny them that fun, that great thrill. And I remember having a couple of mates who could drive. I couldn't drive until I was 22, I think. But yeah, horrific. One bad night. That's
also,
it. It's over.
would have taken away the Beach Boys' entire oeuvre. I mean, if you can't drive, surfing would still have been left. Imagine if you couldn't. It's half of songs and stuff when you're young, and American songs about driving.
Yeah.
But it's setting. I mean, my son is going to turn 17 at the end of July, and he'll obviously want to learn to drive. And I just know it's going to be a disappointment to him because he'll suddenly realise how many bus lanes there are and how many box junctions. He'll lose his licence in a year. I'm sure.
It's not like those adverts where they go around those mountains.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, driving's not fun anymore.
No.
But I grew up in rural Scotland. Nick grew up in Cumbria, and kids at my school died in car crash. I think it was the leading cause of death by far. It was insane. I was in a crash, and me and my mate were egging my other mate to go faster. So because we're like 15.
Was that the one
16.
when you had your leg crushed?
No, that was a different one.
Okay. Pattern emerges. So basically, we're up for it. 6 months. Independent make an appearance now, Liam. More and more people feel it's safe to state the bleeding obvious.
Yeah, so NHS gender care has been taken over by secrecy and ideology, the Health Secretary claims. This is Victoria Atkins. She said that this myth that for children and young people grappling with adolescence who are questioning their identity, their sexuality or their path in life, that the answer to their questions was inevitably to change gender to solve their feelings of unease, discomfort or distress. She says that's ridiculous, and she's right. I mean, the whole idea behind gender treatment in this country and in America and across much of the West has been, people have said, it's evidence-based, when in fact it's not evidence-based at all. The drugs that are being prescribed off-label. They haven't been trialled for that purpose. Doctors say, puberty blockers are reversible. They're not. They often leave kids with long-term issues such as sterility, inability to have an orgasm and things like that when they're older. And they say, the gender ideologists have said, but it's the best for kids. We're saving lives because if they don't transition, they're going to be unhappy, they're going to kill themselves. And anyone who questions it is an extreme far-right bigot, including people like J.K. Rowling, who obviously isn't.
They say that phrase, which is getting challenged more now, which I'm pleased to see, is would you rather have a live daughter or a dead son? About the suicide thing. Yeah. Whereas the reality is suicide is an issue, but it doesn't decline after transition. They continue to be very vulnerable to it.
Yeah, exactly. As I said earlier, more and more people are coming out now and saying this is terrible, and it's easy to come out now. I compared it to supporting Man City, but it's better late than never. Other people are going the other way. I just saw Andrew Doyle, our great leader, on X posting about Novara Media, who are very much the other way. They're doubling down, saying the cast review has been torn to shreds. So some are too dug in, and they'll criticise the cast report. Yeah. But normal people will sort of wake up and go, OK, this is insane that it's ever happened.
You can even see like Stonewall and The Guardian trying to do a sort of reverse ferret to say, we were always critical and questioning it. And
the Harry Potter woman in the House of Lords who used to run Stonewall, she's been trying to cover her tracks. What's her name? Lord Hunt. Not Lord, sorry, Baroness Hunt.
Right.
I have to try and remember this. It's interesting, Novara Media, though. I think they're on the verge of splitting. There's some deep divisions between there. Well, I think Bastani may come over to the dark side.
Brown just had to do a tweet, to try. She obviously had a solicitor's letter.
But anyway, over to the Telegraph. Nick, last story of this half, I think. Class A drugs are the new burglary.
Yeah, hard drugs legalised by stealth as more than a third of offenders avoid prosecution. So 39.2% of people caught with hard drugs avoided a criminal record and were said handed community resolutions, which means they just have to apologise or pick up some litter or something. I mean, there's a five-fold increase since 2016. So these with a lot of these things, you can just admit guilt and apologise, these so-called community resolutions. And it's a bit of it's ludicrous. I mean, this is the continued decline of the country. Now, I do understand in some cases, you catch someone who seems like an all right kid with drugs at a party or something. You don't want to destroy his life with a criminal record. But it can't be the norm that you're caught with heroin and you're let off. I mean, that's absolute insanity.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, they don't let them keep the heroin, Nick.
They just apologised.
So they've
sorry.
They've had a bad day.
Right.
I mean,
I know you're Scottish, Lee. I'm sorry to discriminate against your people.
I want to know who these people are, because I take your point, and certainly, you know, if you go to a party and somebody says, "Do you want some of this?" You go, "Yeah, go on then." That shouldn't ruin your life. It's not well advised, but it's an easy slip. They wouldn't get arrested in the first place, but I don't see the scenario in which they get found. Presumably, you get pulled over or something because you are driving erratically, and then do you know what I mean? Very few people are walking around on the street suddenly getting collared.
Yeah, or you can get stopped. You can get stopped at the random searches at tube stations and stuff like that.
Oh, they do that.
Sniffer dogs.
Okay.
Outside nightclubs, sniffer dogs and stuff.
I mean, it's always got to be they hit for the dealers, isn't it? That's always the thing. And the further up the chain you can go, that's always like the plot of every movie, isn't it? Or
Although
whatever,
in Dubai and some other places, they have really effective sort of anti-drugs legislation just by absolutely nailing anybody who's got it, and like you can sort of avoid being like, I think you get torn apart by horses or something. Unless you go through your phone and say, yeah, these people also take drugs.
It's called deterrence. It used to work. Now you think it's a disease and it's about poverty and...
No, absolutely. Singapore, the Hilton. 3 down, 1 to go. In the final section, sexual discrimination in the Lake District, Dawn French fearing to speak out, and divorce is only a click away. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Good evening. Well, I thought it was an absolutely knockout front page of The Sun that went online last night and was on display all over the country today. Union joke, and there is. Well, you can just about make out that it's the Union flag, better known perhaps as the Union Jack, but they've decided to add pink and all sorts of colours to it, and that is on sale for fans going to the Olympics in France this year to buy and to wear, which led to a great big panic. What on earth would be on the shirts, shorts and kit of the athletes? Well, a statement did come out mid-morning from the British Olympic Association, which said all Team GB athletes will wear the Union Jack as normal in Paris. However, Team GB kit itself is expected to include different shades of blue or red as in previous years. Well, I'm sorry, I don't really buy that. Now, we sent Adam Cherry out to Wembley today to ask some members of the public how they felt about this.
Latest episode of Companies Fixing Things That Weren't Broken. We're going to be asking the people of London what they think of the changing colours of the Team GB Olympic logo. Take a look at this.
The blue, the red and the white, it's perfect. I feel like, you know, it shouldn't be that controversial, but, you know, it's iconic. I feel like the colours are iconic. Everyone's known London for being, you know, red, white and blue.
I feel like it doesn't really represent England like that. The colours of the colours are kind of random.
I think it's very colourful. It's very pinkish and quite unicornish kind of thing, yeah.
A bit too unicornish for Team GB.
A little bit.
Disgusting. Well, we're British. Their colours are not pink and purple and...
like, you know, some patterns on there. It's all going crazy.
That's not our flag. That don't represent me.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat zone.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners for our final section. So the Daily Mail, Leo, good luck sustaining the will to live as you elaborate on the details in this one.
So a woman who used to work in an upmarket bed and breakfast has won a sex discrimination case after her male boss refused to help her change bed sheets because he said it was a woman's job. Well, he denies saying that.
Yeah.
I mean, what he should have said is it's an employee's job.
Yeah.
And so do it, or I'm not giving you any money. And also, you're fired.
Absolutely, my reading. I read it through twice to see what I'd missed. She was telling her boss to make his own bed.
Yeah.
I was like,
when
she'd
been hired to make beds in this hotel, and he slept in one of the beds, but he's a person, so he said, well, can you make the bed? And
I don't know whether he'd had a row with the wife and had used one of the guest rooms and then said, no, you've got to fix that because it was, and she said, well, maybe you should make your own bed, or I don't know. But I cannot understand. I mean, we're covering it, so I guess we've fallen into it. How does this story make it into national newspapers? It should barely be in the,
How dare you? This is about my people.
Barrow in Furness.
This is important. As someone who grew up with parents running a guest house in Lake District, it's half motivated to this story about me. No, I didn't choose this. I didn't choose it. But it is exactly about the exact same scenario. But he's just done what he's done is Cumbrian banter. Yeah. He said, it's a woman's right. This is called banter in the lakes, and she doesn't realise that. And it's discrimination against my people. We're allowed to have banter. That's mild for the lakes, And she's, it's not like you see it's not like the postcards. The lakes is, it's rough banter.
Yeah.
And that's what he's done there.
Two sugars, love.
And the other thing she's exploiting is it's very hard to get staff up there, and so she's exploiting that and sort of, in my opinion, I'm sure she's very nice, but she's sort of using the fact that she's got that power that you can't get anyone to come and work there anymore.
Yeah.
I feel bad for them though. Got 9.8 on Airbnb or whatever it was, and 4.5 stars on TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
These are good ratings. It's a great bill. I think they should be supported. And now that it's going to spiral, isn't it, out of control? He's going to be drinking.
Yeah.
There'll be a half bottle of Glen's vodka found under a pillow.
All right.
And that'll get him a low star. We wish him well. The Telegraph now, Nick, a story about a much-loved national treasure who is tempted to stay in her chest.
It's cancel culture forcing people into a corner of self-censorship, says Dawn French. And she says, we're all talking about inclusivity and favouring difference and all the rest of it. And that's all great, which it isn't, so that's woke. So you say the woke caveat thing first. Yeah. But then she says, we're quick to blame, litigation, trolling, blah, 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 and we're all self-censoring, and she's done it and she's felt bad about it. And she's right, again, but she's late to the parties. Celebrities are very scared, especially in acting, especially in comedy, and they're now saying a few things like this, little noises, and they like J.K. Rowling and so on. But they should have been saying all this much earlier, but...
Well, she's not even saying it. She said she was on a podcast and they said, we're not going to talk about J.K. Rowling because she's, transphobic. And Dawn French was like, oh, what's happening? And she goes, oh, educate yourself, catch up, Dawn, come on. And instead of going, I think that's a bit harsh talking to me like that, she should say, I like J.K. Rowling. She's good. She's a good person. I've known her for years, and she's,
She kind of did. She said that she knows her a bit and so on.
Well, she's trying to smother it with kindness, but,
Yeah, the trouble is, people worry way too much about what other people think of them. Yeah. It's like, you got to just have some faith in yourself, have some faith in God.
You've never had that problem, Leo, which is a great thing.
But they used to be, Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders used to be the most, that was their great thing. They didn't care what people thought of them. They made fools of themselves. They bashed into the scenery left, right and centre, and they were great for it.
Puritans now that are so quick to point the finger at any little thing and accuse people of all kinds of things. As a culture, we need to be turning around and absolutely mocking and destroying these people, the people who are trying to bring down anybody who's different to them.
100%. I think this will be our last story, probably. The NHS are mocked, Leo, for their woke band. I don't know what you call it, weird little, it's like a car showroom flags or something they put up.
Yeah, so NHS bosses have been criticised after displaying a banner featuring 21 genders and sexualities in a hospital reception. I mean, I'm assuming there it is. There's the banner there. It looks like something at the Olympics. But I'm assuming they're being mocked because it doesn't have all 483 genders on it, which is a hate crime now in Scotland. But this is at Royal Stoke Hospital, so it includes groups such as gender fluid, which is something that leaks from their underpants. There's people who feel they have more than one gender, and gender queer and all this sort of stuff. Unfortunately, the hospital, while they're focusing on creating a ridiculous banner with lots of silly made-up flags on it, they've been one of the worst performing hospitals in the country, or NHS trust in the country, ranking 102 out of 120. So maybe if they focused on you know, fixing people.
One of my favourites is demisexual. Only feels sexual attraction once an emotional bond has been formed. That's a woman. Demi-romantic. Only feels a romantic attraction after an emotional bond has been formed. That's a normal person. Then they have agender, which must be a nightmare. Say, what are you? I'm agender. Which one? Agender. It's like a Abbott and Costello sketch.
Indefinitely. But also, and more seriously, it makes maybe all those people feel included. It will make thousands of people who don't understand what the hell's going on feel excluded. They will feel that is a hostile environment to them suddenly, and all they want to do is get well. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Tuesday's front pages. Daily Mail now banned trans women from female sports. Financial Times, US and Europe in frantic diplomacy to deter Israel from striking back at Iran. Telegraph, Ben Wallace, West must stand up to Iranian bullies. iNews, Britain and US tell Netanyahu, don't start a world war with Iran. Revenge. Metro, this is an outrage, Donald Trump's latest court case. And finally, the Daily Star, TV Vicky, the dog ate my passport. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Leo Kirst and Nick Dixon. I'll be back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with a couple new guests. If you're watching at 5 a.m., stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you very much for your company. I hope you sleep well, and I will see you tomorrow. Good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, welcome to the latest weather forecast from the Met Office. It's going to stay blustery over the next 24 hours, but less windy than it has been, and the showers will slowly ease as well. Low pressure is pulling away, it's moving east. We've got high pressure arriving later in the week, but for the time being, the weather stays very changeable, with showers or longer spells of rain moving through during the evening. Many of these showers will actually fade away after midnight, although some will continue down the North Sea coast there. 1 or 2 for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and central England, but otherwise plenty of drier and clearer weather emerging later in the night. A chill in the air first thing Tuesday, but too breezy for most for a frost. And there'll be plenty of bright weather first thing, especially for Scotland, Northern England, parts of western UK. But further cloud and showers will affect the North Sea coast, and showers will tend to bubble up elsewhere, particularly for Northern Ireland, parts of central and southern England, Wales and northwest Scotland. It's going to stay on the cold side, but temperatures a degree or so higher compared with Monday's, and less windy, so a bit more pleasant out there. Another chilly start on Wednesday, but again, plenty of sunshine first thing, turning cloudy and damp for Northern Ireland, showers emerging elsewhere, but plenty of bright or at least drier weather in between the showers. And then as we go through the latter half of the week, things do slowly turn drier, more settled and warmer.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at